What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Lines on Water podcast. I'm Nathan Blank.
I'm Caden Parisian, and we have some fun topics to talk about today.
So, we're going to kind of divide this into two separate ideas, but it's going to be one big thing. So, we're going to be talking about fish biology and conservation. Now, if you guys have listened to the podcast before, we particularly like talking about freshwater fish, especially walleye, here in the beautiful province of Manitoba, mostly around the southern part, fishing of the lower part, like Winnipeg, little bits in the white shell, here and there. We like to do it all, but mainly we like to talk a lot about walleyes. So we're going to talk about everything today. We're going to talk about barotrauma. We're going to talk about some fish anatomy. We're going to talk about social media playing a part with fish releases and all that sort of fun stuff. So make sure you guys get some popcorn, sit down, get comfortable, and let's dig right into it. So, fish can only be understood, or you can only really, how do I put this here?
I don't know what you're saying, but
in order to think about the big things, you got to understand the small things, and we got to understand fish biology and the fundamentals of fish. So fish, what are fish? Well, specifically in Manitoba, there's 80 different species of fish. So fish generally are cold-blooded vertebrates. Have vertebrates, they're not invertebrates, and they are so broad in the way they appear, and the way they are physiologically, and the way they are psychologically, the way they behave, all that sort of fun stuff. So I want to first talk about fish anatomy. So what parts of the fish are the most important? Now, obviously, if you're listening to this, we don't have a picture or diagram to show, but just bear with me here. So one of the first things when you think about a fish is how you hold a fish. And if you're holding, let's say, a bigger fish, let's say 40-inch pike or just a bigger, longer fish, you're generally holding it in the gill and either in the belly or right by the anal fin, basically, somewhere like that. Whereas if you're holding a smaller fish where they don't have teeth, you're holding it by the mouth. So how do we hold fish? Well, for one, we need to understand what the gills are. So the gills, as people may not actually understand, water comes in through the front of their mouth and it is fanned out of the gills. So that's how oxygen is taken, how it is in the actual red parts of the gills. There's a gill cover, which is the part when you go up a fish. There's a pocket up there which you want to be grabbing. If you're grabbing into the gills, it's a very sensitive part of the fish. It's not good at all. So that's why the gill cover, the gill plate, is what you're generally grabbing. So that's one very important piece.
you'll definitely feel when you're in the fish's, gills, because they basically have I wouldn't call it teeth, but they have sharp rows of skin that goes
It's like
backwards.
barb. Once you go in, you pull out.
It's really hard to get back out. So you'll definitely know when you're in the fish's gills. For the most part, you don't want to hold fish in the gills anyways because it does hurt them. But with some of the bigger fish, it is kind of necessary, and it's also appropriate because of how big their heads are and how much room they actually have up there. So I don't know how to explain this, but to actually grab them, you'll feel a gill cover, and then you basically slide up towards the mouth up here, and it's almost like a pocket where your hand is. Like I said, you'll feel if you're in the gills or not. But like Nathan was saying with little fish too, you also want to hold not in their gills. Like if we're talking trout or whatever, you don't want to really hold them in their gills because they're very sensitive in that way. But with bass, perch, crappie, sunfish, you can always hold them by the mouth. They have like sandpaper teeth. Mm-hmm. But yeah, very important for fish handling as well.
And that's a lot of it is teeth, because obviously if all fish didn't have teeth, you'd be licking them. But with more predator fish, so walleye, muskie, pike, all these are on top of the food chain. They're gonna be different than things that are on the lower part of the food chain. So yeah, that's one very important thing that I don't think people really consider is, and I've seen it too. People will go to grab them with the gills, but they're going too far into the gills, if that makes sense. And with bigger fish, it's a lot easier. There's going to have a lot more room to stick your hand up there. So if you're catching a bigger pike, there's so much more room. Like you can put your whole hand up there, basically. But with smaller fish, you still have to be careful is that you're only holding them by the gill. And then support is the biggest thing, too, because if you're holding them by their head, you got to think, if it's a long fish, that is not good for them at all. So support under the belly. And then with people taking pictures on social media, like that's, let's say a walleye, for instance, like when you see a bunch of those, people always have them at the gill and then on the belly. So you're horizontal holding the fish. Sometimes people will curve it like that to make the dorsal. On some fish there's a pointy dorsal and a soft dorsal. So that's the dorsal fin's on the top of the fish, and that'll make it flare, stuff like that. And if you also curve it too, you can get the gills to come out. But that's one thing I think is very important, is how you actually hold a fish.
And I feel like too, if you're just getting into fishing too, or probably one of the easiest ways to hold a fish is if you grab by the tail and support just before their neck, like just before their gills, basically. If you hold there's two fins that come out, especially on a walleye, pike, and a whole bunch of other different species. Hold it right there, basically on their chest and by their tail, and just like this, probably one of the easier ways to hold a fish. And once you start getting more experienced, you can obviously play around with different techniques and how you hold them, and different pictures, and make them look flashy and bigger and stuff like that. But probably one of the safest ways to hold a fish.
Actually, you bring up a great point too, because actually now that I think of it, I would say there's about 3 different ways to hold a fish. One would be your typical bass. You're holding it just at the mouth. So people do a small one with a large mouth and make them look nice and fat. Generally with a bigger bass, you do want to support them, but it's a thing. You just hold them up by one finger. So the second one, like I was saying, with walleye generally, one in the gill, one in the bottom of the belly, holding support horizontal. But actually, that was another good point you brought up, because what people do with either catfish or sturgeon, and that's what you do with your sturgeon, you hold, so there's the peduncle on the fish, which leads into the caudal fin. The caudal fin is the tail fin, so caudal, peduncle, and then the caudal fin. So some people will grab that, and then they'll hold, did my phone just go off?
No, you're hearing stuff.
And the right hand, or whatever, your stronger hand, will be supporting just under the belly, or sometimes just under the neck, like that, and just playing like that. So I'd say there's 3 different types of way to hold a fish.
Yeah, but with some fish too, some fish, like Nathan was saying, they almost have he didn't say this, but by their fin or whatever, they have almost like a built-in handle. So with my sturgeon that I caught through the ice in early December on the Red River, his tail was super thin, probably about like that thin there, and then his tail comes out like this much. So you have basically like a handle to hold that fish there. Just like if you were greeting someone, shaking their hand, basically how you want to hold it so you get a good grip on it, and hold him just below his neck. Same with lake trout. Lake trout have the same thing. But if you were to do that with pike are A, very slimy, and B, their tails are very thick right to the tail. So it could be harder to hold them by the tail because they don't have much of a handmade or like a built-in handle. Same with walleye. Walleye are also very thick to the tail. But yeah, for the most part, holding a fish like that would be the best way to hold them.
And that goes with the conservation side of it too, because if you're not properly handling fish, they're gonna have a higher chance of basically just dying out.
And they also can't make accurate studies to when these fish have been beat up, not having the necessary, not taking the necessary precautions in releasing those fish.
Yeah, the death rate is just significantly higher if you don't know how to hold a fish. And when I say if not holding a fish, that could be not having a good grip on it and having that thing flip out of your hands and then hit its head on the ice or fall out.
Rocks or something.
Or rocks. I mean, literally in the past video, I almost dropped a fish, but I saved myself. But that can't happen. That's why you have to have very good grip. You got to make sure you have the right grip. But it's not just good for you; it's also good for the fish, because it'd be super easy to just as hard as you can, but you want to kill the fish. So how you hold them is very important. So that was just one thing I want to bring up. But fish anatomy. So a few important parts of the fish. So if you're just looking at it from the side, let's say you're filleting and you're just looking at the top. Let's say a Sanovitrius, a walleye, you're looking at this. So they're going to have the dorsal fin up top. On the side will be called the pectoral fin. That's usually what's honestly moving most in the water. It's usually just kind of flapping like that. Underneath their belly, just, I guess, down more from where their gills meet, basically under their neck, is the pelvic fin. Farther down would be the anal fin. On catfish, those 4 species, on the top in the back, near the peduncle, would be the adipose fin. And then the peduncle and the caudal fin.
Yeah.
So that's something, just if you're looking at a fish too. Also, when you're filleting a fish, let's say, again, I'm going to use walleye as an example a lot. It's a lot of what we see down here. It's most popular. So if you open up a fish, I'm going to reword that. Even before you open up a fish, you can usually tell how it's a male and how it's female. How would you say you can identify them?
For walleye, I'd usually identify if it's really skinny Like if it's, has a small, well, I would say small head, but like usually a smaller body, especially in the springtime, you can really tell like when they've, just got done mating and stuff like that. You can easily tell what's a male and what's a female, because a female would be full of eggs. Same with basically throughout the entire year too. Like when you catch these greenback walleyes that, are 24 inches and they weigh 8 pounds, you can easily tell that that's a female because she's, active, feeding, and she probably also has eggs. But yeah, for the male too, they'd be really skinny and, a big tail and a big head. And yeah, that's how I would usually tell one.
Yeah, I mean,
before opening it up.
Generally with most species, the female is generally bigger because, I mean, the eggs are going to, with packs on
They're
the
chunky,
way too.
yeah.
Yeah, but generally, it's so weird because when you see a master walleye, sometimes, I mean, males can get huge too, don't get me wrong, but generally the females are just fat in the belly, you can just tell. And then with the males, they're either skinnier or it's kind of, there's so many factors to it, but yeah, they just look like rockets almost. They have like a small head, like the first bit of the shoulder's nice, and then it just slims right out.
Yeah.
But it's also very different, like on Lake Winnipeg compared to like the whiteshell.
Yeah, most fish in Lake Winnipeg is usually, round, we'll say, like fats. And,
Yeah,
because there's so much nutrients in that lake, it's ridiculous because they can just keep feeding and feeding. But yeah, like a Lake of the Woods or something in the whiteshell where there isn't as much nutrients as Lake Winnipeg has with all the inflows and outflows, you could definitely, tell which one is a male and which one is a female.
Yeah, and you open it up, you can see if it's a female because there'll be eggs. You'll know what the eggs look like. And with a male, it kind of depends. It's called milt, I think is the technical term, but you know what that is if it's a male, the white stuff. And yeah, so when you're keeping fish, generally, obviously, the rule of thumb is the bigger ones will carry more eggs. So a walleye can carry up to 26,000 eggs per pound of body weight. So it's very important you're letting go females, which are generally bigger fish because females can be bigger. That's why I like to keep between like 16 to 18 inch fish. I will not touch or keep a 20-inch fish unless I like kill it somehow.
Yeah,
I will not keep a big fish. I refuse.
You get
And kind of the smaller ones. I mean, the females when they're small will look like a male when they're small, but it's still a small fish. It's not gonna hurt anything. And the other thing too, when you're keeping smaller ones, I mean, this is not gonna have a dramatic change in anything because there's so much fish. But competition, if there's just a complete abundance of fish, there's more competition. Fish can't grow that big. That's what happens to some lakes. They get stunted. Like I'm gonna be honest, Skoda. They get stunted because if there's only the 2-man limit, and over the years there's so many fish, they can't grow big because they're stunted. There's too much competition. But Lake Winnipeg is huge. There's an unlimited amount of resource and nutrients. But yeah, that's not nothing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about fish handling. We talked about holding fish, female and male. Now, the most like not contra. I don't even know how to explain this, but the most talked about is mortality rates with fish handling. Right. Fish handling 100%. Dictates when you catch a fish, how you handle that fish is whether it's going to live or potentially die. Because when I see it in videos and here and there, people just don't handle the fish properly at all, and you can just tell it's not going to have a good chance when it's released.
Obviously. Yeah, and when you mishandle that fish, it has, it's hard for that fish to recover again, especially if it's in a smaller environment. I'll just throw an example in Reynolds Ponds. In such a small environment, that fish has a very high chance of getting caught again with the same poor handling time, I'd say. Like, if you get mishandled like 3 times in a day, if it's, messed up in the head because of how many times it's been released or whatever. But it's really important to, do some research on how to release fish. There's so many YouTube videos, there's so many articles out there on how to release fish, fish handling and stuff like that. And you just want to take those into exercise when you're on the lakes and just keep in mind on, the fish has, I don't know, how do I word that?
You gotta protect the resource.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And you gotta think too, like it's gonna vary between lakes with forage and the feeding patterns and all this. There's so many different factors. There's not like a one answer for every water body. Obviously, everything's gonna be different. But like a 30-inch walleye can be like 15 years old.
Yeah,
and I think crazy. Like if you kill like that fish is potentially from early 2000. Well, I mean it's 2024 now. Yeah, so that could be like an early 2010s fish, which is absolutely crazy to think about it. If you were to mishandle that. So obviously, when you catch bigger fish, you want to take more pictures, more videos. You got to keep in mind you're dealing with an old fish and I mean, as they get older, maybe the spawning isn't as good.
Yeah.
But if they're still in prime for spawning, that's so many eggs that could like be hatched. And keep in mind, I think like it's like 1% or less of eggs that actually like survive, because you got to think of if they actually hatch first of all.
Right.
If perch don't eat them, because perch love eggs. But generally, they try and find cover, so sometimes they'll go up in the tributaries in, like, the Red River. But generally, they won't go in the middle of the lake, basically, so that's one thing, too. But, yeah, you got to make sure you're doing your part with what you can, with making sure you're getting those fish back.
Right, exactly.
And, yeah, I've seen it so many times. Let's say it's super cold out and this fish is out so long it's freezing the eyeballs. Yeah. Or you just like grab it and it's thrown on the ice and it's flopping around and all that. Mm-hmm. Don't let it see it at all. Get a good grip on the fish. Don't hurt the fish. Quickly get them unhooked. Make sure you have proper pliers. Yeah. I'll give an example. The 90-degree ugly stick pliers, it's like a gun when you're holding it. So good for unhooking fish, first of all, because if it's just the straight pliers, it's so much harder to get down there. I love my pliers because I can get it unhooked so much faster. I think pliers is super important. Like, spend the money, have nice quality pliers. I think it's super important, first of all, because getting the hook out is arguably the most important part, because if you botch it and you can't get it out and it's stuck down there, well, it's dead. Or if you yank it too hard and you cut something, it's dead.
Right. Or and you also want the proper tools for the right fish as well. Like if you're fishing for crappie or sunfish or whatever, and you're using those ugly stick pliers that are this big, I mean, it's probably not the best for it. As long as you're careful, go ahead. But a small pair of forceps is really nice, with really small needle nose pliers is also really good too for these small fish like trout, or where they have fragile mouths, crappie and all that fun stuff. And when you're dealing with muskie or pike or lake trout, you obviously maybe want a little bit of a bigger setup for pliers to actually get those hooks out. You don't want tiny hemostats that are that big, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've been fishing with people who cannot get this hook out. And I mean, I've a little bit more experience too. I've been doing this for a little while now. And then I can come in and get that thing out super quick. It also does come with experience. And I'm going to say this right now. When I was younger, I completely mishandled fish. Like, I'm not even going to pretend like I didn't. I mean, I learned from my mistakes, but there's definitely been some fish that have died because of me. And I don't
know how many times I've counted in the tent where we're fishing and it's like a minute out of the water and you're still trying to take the hook out.
Yeah, so I'm speaking from experience. I'm not even pretending as long as you realize what you're doing and you at least fix it, as opposed to, I'm not sure what's worse, realizing you're doing it wrong and keep doing it, or just being completely oblivious to it, but just not making sure it's not a habit, just getting fish back in the water if you're going to keep them. And we're going to move on to the next part, is when you keep fish. How do you kill it? So there's a few different methods. We've definitely found one we like now, a party trick. But yeah, it depends the species too, but I'm going to, again, talk about walleye. One thing I will say is, one of the methods I absolutely hate is when people keep fish is when they just chuck them on the ice and let them die.
Yeah.
I absolutely cannot stand it.
Yeah.
It just, for what it's worth, just put it out of its misery. One thing too, I don't even think the meat tastes as good, because, I mean, fish don't have like emotions, but they have like, I don't want to say hormones, but they have a pain sensor in their head, like, okay, something's not right. And I feel like the meat just like tenses up, does not taste good at all.
Well, so stressed, obviously, right?
Yeah, so I think if you just immediately kill the fish, it can be a whole lot better. I hate when I see people chuck them out. Just throw that's misery.
It's sometimes with us,
if you're going to keep it.
It's sometimes with us too, like, when we get stressed over something, or as humans, we sometimes, may not feel as well, right? We're sick sometimes in some cases, but like same with fish too. Like when they're stressed on the ice, just sitting there, they're obviously going to get tense and stressed, and, I don't know if you can notice the meat not tasting good, but, it might not be as flaky or as white as you would want it to be. So putting Yeah, taking the misery out of the fish right away when you get on the ice is key. Yeah, I like that point though.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure if it's just the idea that like the fish I'm eating was just sitting on the ice, but I feel like it tastes different. Maybe I'm just talking out of my rear, but yeah. So methods, a few methods I really like. So I've honestly done so many over the years. I used to stab 'em right in between the head, right into the brain or something. The problem is if you don't know where you're hitting, it might just like right in between the eyes. You got to make sure you're hitting the right spot. So that's one thing, which is why I probably wouldn't suggest it. Another very can you stop laughing, sir?
I'm sorry.
Another malicious way is if you like on top of the head, ding dong hello
If
3
you
times.
bonk them with a scoop hard enough, you'll knock them out, and yeah, it'll kill them.
And you can tell when they're dead with that way because I mean, one the head will it's kind of graphic. The head will kind of go up and they'll just like everything will move.
Yeah.
The nerves just go kablooey, and you know the fish is dead. Sorry guys, we're gonna go back to it. A little bit of interruption for onions, but yeah, as I was saying, you'll know the nerves just go completely wild on the fish and they're dead. And another point I'll add too is sometimes you think a fish is still alive because it's moving. If it's dead, it can still have nerves and seem like it's alive. It'll still kick and just it can be like 20 minutes later, all of a sudden it just starts flopping again. It's super weird, even if you like completely kill them, but it's just nerves. And my new favorite method of killing fish.
It's kind of brutal, but usually some people would take a screwdriver or a knife and cut their throat, which is really easy.
Well, that's
to
another
do.
good
Yeah, that's probably one of the easier ways to do it. But if you're looking for a fun party trick when you're out on the ice, is just under the throat, where their throat connects to their head. You stick it under there, usually where you would hold the fish in the gills. You take your 2 fingers, put it up there, grab their back, and snap the head in half or snap their neck in half, and it basically just kills them almost instantly. You don't need that much force. You just kind of have momentum and basically break its neck, and it's out like a light switch.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, one thing too is if you bleed them out, so you slit the throat. I mean, you can also when you snap their neck in half, they're gonna bleed out.
Yeah.
But if you bonk them and then you can do like a combination, I think bleeding out's important too because the meat tastes better after.
The meat's a lot more.
It's cleaner. It's cleaner for you later.
Yeah, because when you cut into a fish and if you haven't slit its throat, it's all bloody, and then you just make a mess of your kitchen. Then your mom yells at you, and then Other than that, slitting the throat is probably one of the cleanest ways to do it. But it's also messy on the ice at the time. But it's a lot cleaner at home. So
selective harvest. Keep fish for table fare. The big ones don't taste that good either.
No, honestly.
That's what she said. And
okay.
And cut. And just keep smaller fish. They'll taste better. Just take out the smaller ones.
One of my perfect sizes is like 14, 15 inches. That's like one of my perfect sizes.
Yeah.
It's super easy to clean, first of all. And yeah, like Nathan said, the big ones don't taste like this.
Don't laugh. Don't be like Uncle Ricky who keeps the biggest one he can find. Don't be that guy.
No.
You're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy.
You'll get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and slot size too. They also changed that, so you can't even keep a big fish for the wall anymore.
Yeah.
Which is why reproduction mounts are good, freezing replicas and back-weight taxidermies if you want to Winnipeg. But yeah, so you're still commemorating your catch, but that fish is still swimming.
Exactly.
Which is awesome. It's more expensive, but anyway. Back to topic here. Selective harvest, make sure you're keeping the right size fish.
Mm-hmm. So let's get into another topic here, kind of fast forwarding back a little bit to releasing fish. We also want to talk a little bit about barotrauma. We've kind of recently talked, or I don't know if you guys tune into Uncut Angling or whatever, but he did a really good example about barotrauma. We're just kind of skim over a couple of facts here. But yeah, that's kind of our main source or whatever. So barotrauma. So we're going to kind of flip over from walleyes to crappie now that also swim in Manitoba's waters. So when you're catching these fish, crappie usually like to sit in little holes in the lake that deep down, that kind of slope down from the lake's natural depth. So if the natural depth is like 20 feet of water or whatever, and it ducks down to 30 feet, that's usually where they're going to be. So fishing for fish below 30 feet of water is a little dangerous because of their swim bladder. When you reel them up that fast, their swim bladder adapts to what, depth they're in or whatever.
Pressure, has to do with pressure.
The pressure, exactly. So when you try and release it, it has so much air in its stomach that, it tries to float back up and can't get back down to its original depth.
Mhm.
If you want to expand a little more on that.
And barotrauma is it's an interesting topic because Aaron Weeb came out of the woodworks out of nowhere and just completely his whole new idea contrasted other ideas.
Went to
with
fisherman
live
and
imaging.
biologist real fast.
I want to be a fishy biologist, so this is right up my alley. So yeah, and just contrasting ideas, and then the whole thing with live imaging, is it good? Is it bad? Why am I using my hands around? I don't know. But with crappie, you're more, well, even walleye too. Well, you're not worried about like Lake Winnipeg.
No, more
So
like a lake of the Woods where, you get depths of like 40 feet of water where you can catch walleye or deeper natural lakes.
So fish can be in and live in deep water, but they can't come up super fast from that deep water. That's what barotrauma is.
Mhm.
But generally, let's say with crappie more, let's go over to crappie. You'll notice barotrauma, for one, anything past, in my opinion, I don't want to fish past 25 feet of water if I'm not keeping every fish.
Yeah.
And even then, if I accidentally catch a nice fish, I'll feel terrible.
25 is a nice
25 is the nice number I like. But you'll know, and we've seen this from experience, we've seen walleye. We thought it was a walleye's tongue initially when we were younger. No, that was like the inside came out. There's Popeye you'll see with fish. They get almost like bloated. It's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
You'll kind of know.
Yeah.
And when you go release that fish, and it's kind of like when you put a fish in a live well, it'll go upside down because they're air bladder, they're buoyant, like that.
They'll just kind of go upside down.
Yes.
Yeah, they can't. So yeah, let's also get into a topic. I don't know live imaging, but let's get into a topic about kind of live. Okay, whatever. But let's get into a topic about live imaging and how it's kind of a pro and a con each way. But people say, I'll rephrase that. Governments say that live scope for the fishing industry is a threat, they were saying, right? Am I wrong?
Probably.
Yeah, they were saying it's a threat towards future fisheries because of how dangerous of a tool it is to actually target these fish, because targeting fish with live scope makes it so much easier. You can scan 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 feet away and find these fish, and you can catch them immediately as long as they're in the mood. And yeah, you can catch these fish and just keep catching fish and just hurting populations of different water bodies around you. But really, if someone wants to use it for that way, they should, say that live scope is the enemy towards them and not to the people who actually want to use it for sport fisheries or, recreational and experiments with fish biology and all that stuff.
That's an interesting point you make, because I want to make an analogy. Because, the way I look at it is live imaging is a tool. Your rod is a tool, your lures are a tool, everything is a tool to help you. Now, anything given to the wrong person can have destructive anything. I'm gonna say it's gonna be a hot topic, but let's say with firearms, it's not the gun that kills people, it's the person that pulls the trigger.
Exactly.
Might get some people flamed at me here for saying that, but it's true. A moral person who knows how to properly keep fish and not hurt populations can just use the live imaging for their benefit.
Exactly.
Whereas if you get someone who just completely doesn't care at all with a live imaging, that's different. But it's not the live imaging's fault. It's the person's fault.
Exactly.
So it's a tool that helps you. As someone who owns live imaging, it's amazing. And I would never do it to hurt populations or just for my benefit of in a negative way. You know what I'm saying?
It just, it makes your time on the ice that much more enjoyable, or on the water, whichever way you want to use it.
Yeah. And you've seen it for, I'm sure, over social media and certain tournaments can use live imaging. It's more in the States, but wouldn't be surprised if it came here. But yeah, that's interesting. But I think live imaging, if you use it properly, I think it's a tool. It can help you. And Aaron Weeb explained it. Sorry about that, guys. Camera battery died. We're going to get right back into it. As I was saying, with Aaron Weeb's video, we would not have been able to see the fish releases if we weren't for live imaging. No. He clearly showed the fish going down and adjusting its depth, staying upright, and just kind of adjusting. Would we have been able to see that with a normal flasher? No, we would not have.
And he clearly demonstrated that, the live scope unit can be useful for fish experiments and stuff like that. Or, sorry, not experiments, but what would you call it? Like tests, almost?
Yeah, sure.
For a better understanding of how these fish act when they, get past this barotrauma stage or get past the stage of actually getting down to the right depths.
And I mean, Aaron Weeb is a very credible source, but I've also seen him with my own eyes too. Like, that happens with anything past 25 feet. I don't see any need. I mean, even if, like, I wouldn't even feel right if I'm fishing and somewhere past and I could catch a big fish. Like, for what it's worth, even if they're sitting in a deeper pocket, just leave them alone. Let them circle out. You don't need to kill fish just for, no. Especially recreational, you don't need to be killing fish just because. So.
I've experienced this myself too, which was very strange. I went up to Hobbs Resort on Cedar Lake, Cross Bay, northern Manitoba this past summer, and we were catching walleyes, believe it or not, in 45 feet of water. Yeah.
What?
45 feet of water. That was the deepest we've caught. Brought them up. They looked like a walleye we caught from 20 feet of water. They looked beautiful. They were healthy. They showed no signs of barotrauma at all. They were fat because of how much nutrients is in that lake, but their eyes were not popping out of their head. When they got back down, it was unbelievable of how hard they kicked off. We actually saw on our screen of how far the fish went down, and he was easily 35 feet of water instantly. So it depends on the... Why are you looking at me?
What were you doing in 44 feet of water?
I was catching hogs. They were not in 30. They were not in 35 feet of water. That's for sure. We tried searching for walleye in like 30 feet of water. Was not marking anything, and we saw these boats on the outskirts. I was like, they must be in like 50 feet of water. Sure enough, we go out there. We start marking just arcs on our lures, just arc. Or like, are we on top of them? And me and my grandpa hooked a double header 24-inch walleye. Showed no signs of barotrauma whatsoever, but they got down healthy because we saw on our fish finder. We didn't have live scope, but we saw on our 2D sonar that the fish got down to 35 feet of water back safely. We didn't know how he reacted when he got back down. I'm sure he was a little stunned from being pulled up from that depth, but they were pretty cool.
Okay, backpedal. Okay, first of all, I've never even heard of that. I did not realize you were in 40.
I didn't know
what you're doing there.
I didn't know.
You just completely contrast everything we were just talking about. Anyway, yeah, barotrauma is an important topic. Keep that in the back of your mind. That's our point. Just at least be aware.
Yeah.
I don't know why I keep using my hands. Invasive species. We're talking about invasive species. So, an invasive species, what is that? It's something that's not supposed to be there.
No.
Okay?
Something that harms the environment of other fish.
So, what is not supposed to be in Lake Winnipeg? Zebra mussels. What is not supposed to be in marshes and wherever? Goldfish, which are carp, basically. Carp are not, I guess carp. Carp are not supposed to be where they are like 90% of the time. They're native to Europe. I don't know what they're doing over here.
No.
But that's one thing, too, is, I mean, for one, if you're the type of person to release your goldfish, listen to this, don't release your goldfish. Please don't do that. Also, the zebra mussels, it's very interesting because, yes, does it hurt my feet? Yes, does it take away oxygen because they consume oxygen when they're in the water? But it seems like the lakes have gotten clearer. I don't know if that's because of zebra mussels, but I can see farther down my hole on the river in Lake Winnipeg is because of zebra mussels. Maybe, I don't know. I don't want to get...
And I found in past years too, like usually early in the season, like January, December, when there's first ice, like a foot of ice or whatever, and you drill a hole and it's like chocolate milk. It's super weird. That's usually from the lake trying to freeze and from the Red River also dumping in a whole bunch of melted ice and water and stuff like that. And it's usually murky, and then it kind of clears up like late February, March, and then it's not super clear, but it's relatively clear. But yeah, we've noticed now that it's Lake Winnipeg especially is clear in January and December. It's weird.
So invasive species, it is very serious. Don't transport fish for what it's worth. I mean,
clean your boat.
Clean your boat. Yeah, there's more check stations, whatever you want to call it, and near more water bodies. Yes, it might be a little bit out of the way, cost a little bit of your time. For what it's worth, we don't need to ruin the resource because we're taking things from another water body to another water body. It's not worth it.
No.
Now, some are worse than others. Oh, the rusty crayfish, that's more like the woods actually too. Again, apologies for getting interrupted as I was saying. Invasive species. Don't be transporting things in between water bodies. And it could be something as simple as transporting like live bait in a bucket, and there's something in that water that was not supposed to be there. So I don't know, something like that, but it's very important to keep in mind. And on that topic, I don't know if this is, there's a little bit of relation too, but as most people know, there's a shortage of live minnows in Manitoba. And I will explain that. So the government wanting them banned live minnows completely in 2027. So we still got few seasons. They bought out all the dealers, the people who trapped and sold live minnows who had the permit to do so, and they had a buyout for them basically for the next. They would pay them for how much they'd make in the next 4 years, something like that. Now, most people did take the buyout. Now, there's 2 people who didn't take the buyout. So for all in Manitoba, there's 2 dealers. As far as I'm aware, there's 2 dealers, and whether or not they lied about how much they were going to make and they just didn't get the money, because if you didn't take the buyout, you wouldn't get anything from the government, and your operations would be down in 2027. So there's 2 dealers. Whether or not they lied how much they're going to make, and the government said, nope, you don't get a buyout, and you got to keep doing what you're doing. I'm not exactly sure, but that's why there's really no live minnows in Manitoba. It's different in other places, but in Manitoba, there's going to be a shortage of them. They're going to be more expensive. You're not going to find them in stock as much. That's why. So if we're going to want to use live minnows in the last little bit here, you got to go 3 more seasons. So it's something very important to keep in mind. But yeah, live bait will outperform. Well, it's so weird. Sometimes fish will be so picky, especially when there's a cold snap or like a weather changes dramatically and it's just fluctuating so much. But live will generally beat frozen 10-1.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, on the topic of invasive species with minnows, yeah, that's just also something to keep in mind.
Yeah, you just also want to be careful too in the summertime when you're transporting your boat or your kayak or whatever it may be. You always want to wash it before you go from lake to lake, especially Lake Winnipeg, the Winnipeg River, the Red River, anywhere in that area too. With all these zebra mussels everywhere, they will take over your boat.
Don't go from the Red River to like Clearwater and bring zebra mussels with you.
Yeah, that is ridiculous. So you always want to take in mind that you want to use hot water, some soap, make sure you run it through your live well system. Anything that brings water into your boat, you want to clean. So your motor, there's some hot wash stations on our way home from Hobbs Resort in Cross Bay or whatever. We actually were forced to stop, and they cleaned our boat for us. So we had a tag. So whenever we went to the next lake, it was already clean for us. So they ran a hot sea through our boat. So they put muffs on it, ran hot water through, started our motor, got out all that water, ran it through our live well system, and washed our boat completely. So it's really nice to see that they are around, but there's not too many of them. So if you do run into them, please take the time to stop and clean your boat. I think it's actually a fine if you actually drive past one. I'm very positive.
Oh yeah, it's definitely fine.
Yeah, so just take the time, even if you're not stopped, go to your local car wash. If you can get some hot water on it, there's one in Birds Hill, which is a really nice car wash. You can run some soap through it, run some hot water through it, especially hot water to kill all of them. Run it through your motor just so you're protecting different bodies of water from these invasive species.
Yeah, we kind of keep branching out. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a lot of it too. So making sure everything's clean the way it's supposed to be, not transporting anything. Because once it's hard to fix something that never got damaged in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I have to say the government has been doing a lot of different things. Well, not only with like limits and what you're allowed to keep at sizes, but yeah, like they're very strict on preserving everything, which I mean, at the end of the day, if they're doing it for what they think is best based on the data that they have, I mean, who am I to oppose that? But I can have my own opinion on it, but at the end of the day, they're doing it for a certain reason, so there's got to be some logic behind it.
Yeah.
Based on species, so.
No, for sure. Spot on. What are you looking at?
Not much.
All right.
Who fishes in 44 feet of water?
People who catch hogs.
Dingers.
Me and my dad lost hogs.
Hey, no wonder.
Keyword lost. Yeah, we suck, but whatever. It is what it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think at that, we're going to end this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope a few of our points were insightful. Hopefully you had a chuckle here or there. I definitely did. Trying to keep this as professional as possible, but I don't want to be dull and boring at the same time.
Also have some fun with it. Also check out our sources as well from Uncut Angling. He does a very good job of explaining barotrauma. And if you just want to also do some research about conservation and fish biology, you can also go do that as well.
Also, I want to call out Whiteshell Hatchery Branch, Nathan 2028. I will be there. Future fisheries biologist. Expect me. And yeah, make sure you guys check out all those links I'll have down in the description there, and make sure you listen to some of our other podcasts, tune in, listen here and there, and yeah, hear from us if you dare, I guess. Something like that.
Spooky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm Nathan Blank.
I'm Caden Parisian, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you later.